There's a strange moment that catches us off guard, a flash of emotion so sudden and intense that even we don't fully understand where it came from. Maybe it's a sharp comment from someone we know, a forgotten invitation, or a subtle change in someone's tone. Suddenly, we feel a rush of anger, or the sting of rejection, or a deep, inexplicable sadness. These reactions can feel overwhelming, disproportionate to what actually happened, and yet they feel so real, so justified, so powerful in the moment. This is the work of emotional triggers, the hidden landmines in our psyche that, when stepped on, explode into reactions we sometimes can't explain and often regret. What's important to understand is that these triggers are not irrational. They are rooted in something old, something unresolved, something that lives deep inside of us. Emotional triggers are personal. What might seem trivial to one person can feel devastating to another. These aren't just overreactions. They are echoes of earlier pain, remnants of wounds we carry, often without even knowing it. Imagine, for instance, being gently corrected by someone at work. Objectively, it's not a big deal, but something tightens inside you, your face flushes, and you find yourself either snapping back defensively or shutting down completely. This isn't just about this moment. This is about a lifetime of feeling judged, criticized, or never quite good enough. Maybe as a child, your efforts were constantly picked apart. Maybe love was conditional on perfection. And now, here you are, an adult, yet still flinching from those old shadows whenever something vaguely resembles them. Or consider a situation where a friend forgets to include you in plans. It's just one night, no one meant harm. But something inside you twists. You feel forgotten, unimportant, invisible. That pain doesn't come from tonight. It comes from the years you felt overlooked, unheard, maybe even unloved. These old emotional blueprints quietly script our reactions in the present. They're not about what's happening now. They're about what happened then. And this is why recognizing our emotional triggers becomes a form of liberation. When we understand what sets us off, we begin to reclaim power over our emotional world. We begin to see that we're not just reacting to today, we're reacting to yesterday. We're not weak or dramatic or oversensitive. We are responding to old stories that never got fully told, never got resolved, never got healed. The first step in changing this pattern is simple, but deeply courageous. Self-reflection. It requires us to pay close attention to when our emotions spike suddenly. Not to judge ourselves for it, but to become curious. Why did that comment hit so hard? Why did I feel so ignored just now? Why am I this upset about something so small? These questions are not criticisms, they are doorways. They open the path to understanding what still hurts and what needs attention. And as we ask, we begin to create distance between what happened and how we respond to it. Over time, as you observe your reactions more closely, patterns will begin to emerge. You might find that criticism, even when constructive, consistently makes you feel threatened. You might realize that being left out, even accidentally, always takes you back to that lonely child you once were. Journaling these moments can be illuminating, not just the trigger, but the emotion it sparked and the memory it might be linked to. The goal isn't to stop having emotions, it's to understand them, to hold them with compassion, to realize that your reaction isn't coming out of nowhere. It's coming from a story you've lived, and maybe one that still needs healing. Recognizing your emotional triggers is not about becoming immune to them. You may always feel that flicker of discomfort when you sense rejection or judgment. But with awareness, you gain space. You create a pause. And in that pause, everything changes. That pause is where you get to choose. Do I want to lash out, or do I want to breathe through this? Do I want to assume the worst, or do I want to stay curious? That pause is your power. That pause is where you begin to take control, not by suppressing your feelings, but by understanding them. What begins to happen is transformative. You start to notice that your reactions become less explosive, less immediate. You begin to respond instead of react. You start seeing yourself with more compassion and others with more patience. Instead of feeling hijacked by emotions, you start navigating them with grace. And the more you do this, the more your emotional triggers lose their power. They may still whisper, but they no longer get to scream. You become more rooted in yourself, more grounded in your truth, and more free from the unconscious patterns that once ran your life. And in this freedom, you find something deeper: clarity, presence, and a strength that doesn't come from pretending you don't feel, but from truly understanding why you feel and what you choose to do with it. This is where emotional maturity begins. This is where real control starts to take root. Not in the absence of feelings, but in the presence of awareness. Imagine being in a conversation where someone says something that stings just a little. It might not even be harsh, just an offhand comment about how you did something, or a slight disagreement with your opinion. But suddenly, without warning, your chest tightens, your heart beats a little faster, and before you know it, you're reacting, either with sharp words, a defensive tone, or withdrawing completely. Later, you replay the moment and wonder, why did I get so upset? This is where the power of the pause becomes clear. That small space between the trigger and your response is not empty. It's the most potent place in the entire process. It's the space where you choose. Do I act on this emotion right now? Or do I give myself time to respond more, intentionally? Most of the time, overreacting isn't really about the present moment. It's about the absence of that pause. We skip it. We jump from feeling to action so quickly that we don't even realize there was another way. But learning to pause, even for a few seconds, is like throwing a wrench into the automatic machine of emotional reactivity. It stops the gears just long enough for you to breathe, to reflect, to ask yourself what's really happening. And in that breath, in that moment of space, you regain the control that seemed lost only moments before. It doesn't have to be long, just 5 seconds. 3 deep breaths, a quiet question whispered inwardly. Is this about now, or is this about before? These little rituals become anchors. They bring you back to the present, away from the storm inside, and into a state of grounded awareness. The most remarkable thing is that this practice, though simple, can completely shift your experience of conflict and emotion. When you pause, you start to notice the difference between the story your mind is telling and the reality unfolding in front of you. You may hear that old voice say, they're judging you, or they're rejecting you, or you're not enough. But when you pause, you can question it. Is that true, or is that just my old wound talking again? The truth is, most of the time we don't pause because our emotions convince us that the urgency is real, that we must react now, must speak now, must defend now. But urgency is often a disguise for fear. When we buy into it, we act out of that fear. When we pause, we begin to act from clarity instead. This ability to pause doesn't just help you, it transforms your relationships. When you don't react with the same intensity, you change the emotional tone of your interactions. Others begin to feel safer around you. They sense your emotional steadiness, and something beautiful happens. People mirror your energy. When you show patience, you invite patience. When you stay calm, you invite calm. The pause is not silence, it's communication. It says, I'm listening, I'm thinking, I'm choosing how to respond. That level of presence has the power to de-escalate tension, repair misunderstandings, and foster genuine connection. You become the calm in the storm, not just for yourself, but for those around you too. But like any practice, the pause doesn't become easy overnight. Especially in high-stress moments, it can feel almost impossible. That's why it helps to start small. Practice the pause in low-stakes situations. Pause before responding to a casual text. Pause when someone interrupts you. Pause before replying to a mildly irritating email. These little moments are your training ground. Over time, your brain learns a new pattern. Instead of jumping to defend or attack, it starts to seek that pause first. And in time, what was once effortful becomes instinctive. You'll find yourself less reactive, not because you're forcing it, but because your nervous system has learned that safety lives in the pause. Think of emotions like waves. They rise rapidly, crest, and then fall. If we can just stay grounded long enough to ride that wave without being tossed around, we often realize the feeling isn't as permanent or powerful as it first seemed. Pausing allows the wave to crest and fall before we act. We don't suppress the emotion. We just wait for it to settle enough that we can speak and act with intention. This is emotional strength, not the kind that pretends not to feel, but the kind that feels deeply and still chooses peace. The pause also becomes the gateway to wisdom. In those few seconds of stillness, you begin to ask better questions. Instead of, "How dare they?" you might ask, "Why did that bother me so much?" Instead of, "I need to prove my point," you might wonder, "Is it more important to be right or to be connected?" These aren't just intellectual shifts, they're shifts of the heart. They reflect a deeper transformation, one where your identity is no longer entangled with your emotional highs and lows. You start to become the observer of your emotions, not their prisoner. And in doing so, you unlock a deeper level of freedom. With every pause, you reinforce the idea that you are in charge of your response. Not your triggers, not your past, not your fear, you. And this is one of the most empowering realizations you can come to. That no matter what emotion arises, you have the ability to meet it with awareness, to hold it without acting on it, and to choose a response that reflects your highest self. This is how we stop overreacting, not by becoming emotionless, but by becoming emotionally wise. There's something profoundly liberating about realizing that your first thought doesn't have to become your final truth. This is the essence of challenging your thoughts, a practice that becomes a natural companion to the pause. When strong emotions arise, your mind often fills in the blanks with stories, assumptions, and beliefs, rooted not in the current reality, but in past wounds and imagined fears. These thoughts feel real. They sound convincing, but they are often just echoes of old patterns. And unless we question them, we act on them as if they are facts. Imagine someone doesn't respond to your message. Your mind instantly whispers, "They're ignoring me." Or worse, "They don't care about me." That belief sends a ripple through your body. Tension in your chest, a rise in defensiveness, a sense of rejection. All this happens before you've even confirmed the truth. In reality, maybe they were busy, maybe their phone died, maybe they were having a hard day and didn't know what to say. But your emotions won't wait for evidence. They'll run with the first story you tell yourself. And that's why challenging your thoughts is so essential. You pause, you breathe, then you ask, is this really true? Or is this just one possibility among many? This one question can open the door to clarity. It disrupts the certainty of emotional thinking and creates room for alternative explanations. Maybe their silence doesn't mean rejection. Maybe it means nothing personal at all. By holding space for multiple perspectives, you reduce the emotional intensity and avoid reacting to a story that might not even be real. Another powerful question to ask in those moments is, what else could this mean? This doesn't deny your emotions, it just widens your view. Emotional overreactions often come from narrow thinking, the belief that there is only one possible interpretation. But life is rarely that simple. By introducing new possibilities, you release the emotional grip of that one painful assumption. You can also ask, what evidence do I have that this thought is true? And just as importantly, what evidence do I have that it's not? This helps you anchor your thinking in reality, not emotion. Because when emotions are high, we tend to use extreme language, words like always, never, everyone, or no one. These absolutes are red flags. They point to emotional reasoning, not objective truth. If you catch yourself thinking, they always ignore me, or I never get what I need, that's your signal to pause and investigate. Are those words really accurate, or are they just emotional amplifiers? Usually, when we calm down, we realize the truth is more balanced. Another helpful practice is to ask yourself, will this matter in a day, a week, a year? This question helps reframe the situation from a long-term perspective. When emotions are hot, everything feels urgent. But most of the time, what feels like a crisis in the moment won't matter much later. By zooming out, you shrink the perceived importance of the trigger and deflate the emotional surge. It's not about pretending the feeling isn't valid. It's about choosing the weight you give it. What we're doing here is rewiring the brain. Emotional reactivity is a habit, a neural shortcut that's been used so often it feels automatic. But the good news is that habits can be changed. Every time you challenge an automatic thought instead of blindly believing it, you create a new neural pathway. Over time, this becomes your new default. You teach your mind to pause, question, and reflect before reacting. This is what emotional intelligence looks like in action. Not suppressing feelings, but understanding them deeply and responding wisely. And when you bring this level of awareness into your relationships, it changes everything. Think about the misunderstandings that could be avoided if, before reacting, we paused and asked, "Am I interpreting this fairly?" Or, "Could there be more to the story?" These questions diffuse conflict before it begins. They create space for compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. Because the truth is, many of our emotional stories are born from insecurity and fear. When we challenge them with kindness, we begin to heal those wounds too. The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require anyone else to change. You don't need perfect communication from others. You don't need every situation to go smoothly. You only need your own willingness to pause and reflect. That's where your power lies, and that power is always available to you, no matter how difficult the moment. As you build this habit of challenging your thoughts, you become more grounded, less easily swayed by emotion, less likely to take things personally. You start to see that most of what upsets us isn't about what actually happened. It's about what we believed it meant. And when you learn to question those meanings, you become the author of your inner narrative, not just a character swept along by it. You don't have to believe every thought you think, especially not the ones that shout when you're afraid, hurt, or angry. Thoughts are not facts. They are mental weather, passing, shifting, and often unreliable in storms. The more you remember this, the more you free yourself from overreacting. Because in truth, you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that can observe them, challenge them, and choose a better path. Once you've begun challenging your thoughts and stepping back from emotional assumptions, you're already in the process of reclaiming your power. But to sustain this power, to respond with wisdom and composure consistently, you need something deeper. You need the skill of emotional regulation. This isn't about being emotionless or suppressing what you feel. It's about staying balanced when your emotions want to tip you over. It's about learning to ride the wave without drowning in it, to feel fully without letting those feelings control your every action. And that's where the real transformation begins. Emotional regulation starts with the body. When you're triggered, your nervous system reacts instantly. Your muscles tighten, your breath shortens, your heart races. This is your fight or flight response kicking in, even if there's no physical danger. And if you stay in that state, your mind starts spinning, racing thoughts, catastrophic predictions, reactive impulses. But the body holds the key to reversing this spiral. Something as simple as deep, conscious breathing can flip the switch. Multipunches 3 to 5 slow, intentional breaths can shift your physiology, sending signals to your brain that you're safe, that you don't need to panic, that you can slow down. This is why deep breathing is one of the most powerful emotional tools you have. It doesn't require a teacher, a quiet room, or a perfect mood. It's always available, even in the middle of a heated moment. And when you practice it regularly, it becomes automatic. You train your body to respond to stress with calm rather than chaos. The more often you do this, the more resilient you become. Another profound ally in emotional regulation is mindfulness. This is the practice of simply noticing, without judgment, what's happening right now, inside you and around you. It's the opposite of being lost in thought or hijacked by emotion. When you're mindful, you become an observer. You notice, I'm feeling angry, or I'm overwhelmed, instead of becoming those emotions. That space between awareness and reaction is everything. Because in that space, you can choose. You can take a breath. You can pause. You can ground yourself. Grounding is exactly what it sounds like, anchoring yourself in the present. When emotions feel too big, too fast, grounding brings you back to reality. You can feel your feet against the floor. You can hold something solid in your hands. You can name 5 things you see around you. These tiny, physical actions may seem simple, but they can stop an emotional storm before it becomes destructive. They shift your attention from the mental chaos to the safety of the present moment. And in that present moment, everything is more manageable. But emotional regulation doesn't just happen in the moment. It's also built over time, through the way you care for yourself day to day. Think of your emotional resilience like a bank account. Every time you sleep well, eat nourishing food, move your body, or connect meaningfully with others, you make a deposit. When stress hits, you draw from that account. But if your account is empty, if you're exhausted, isolated, or depleted, your emotional responses will be much harder to manage. That's why self-care isn't a luxury. It's a foundational tool for emotional control. Exercise is particularly effective because it doesn't just release physical tension, it also balances your brain chemistry. It boosts serotonin and dopamine, the neurotransmitters that help you feel calm and happy. Sleep is equally essential. When you're sleep deprived, your brain becomes more reactive and less rational. Even small irritations feel overwhelming. And connection with others provides emotional grounding that no solo practice can replace. Just being seen, heard, or supported by someone you trust can instantly regulate your emotional state. So emotional regulation is not just one thing, it's a system, a blend of moment-to-moment tools like breathing and mindfulness, and long-term habits like sleep, movement, and connection. And when you commit to this system, you begin to notice something incredible. Situations that used to throw you off balance no longer have the same grip. You start responding instead of reacting. You stay calm under pressure. You become someone others look to for steadiness. And perhaps most importantly, you begin to feel at peace within yourself, even when the outside world is chaotic. Remember, emotional regulation doesn't mean you won't feel intense emotions. You will, you're human. But it means those emotions don't get to run the show. They don't get to speak for you, act for you, or make choices on your behalf. You become the container for your feelings, not their prisoner. And that's one of the most empowering things you can ever learn. Because once you can regulate your emotions, you create a life of fewer regrets. You stop saying things you didn't mean. You stop burning bridges you later wish you hadn't. You stop being dragged into drama or turmoil that was never yours to carry. Instead, you move through life with calm, with intention, and with a deep sense of control. Not over others, but over yourself. This is what gives you strength. Not the ability to control everything around you, but the ability to control your own reactions, your own thoughts, your own peace. That's the kind of control that no one can take from you. That's the kind of control that changes lives. The journey toward emotional control reaches its highest point when you begin building deep, unwavering self-awareness. Everything else, recognizing your triggers, pausing before reacting, questioning your thoughts, regulating your emotions, flows more naturally when you truly know yourself. And self-awareness isn't just about being able to say I'm angry or I'm stressed. It's about understanding the full map of your internal world, what you feel, why you feel it, and how those emotions shape your actions. Without that awareness, emotions catch you off guard. They rise up like waves you never saw coming. And before you know it, you're speaking harshly, walking away too fast, or holding on to resentment you don't even fully understand. But when you're aware, when you know your patterns, you can see the wave before it crashes. And you can decide whether to ride it, redirect it, or simply let it pass. Self-awareness begins with the body. Most of us are so disconnected from our physical sensations that we only notice them when they're screaming at us. Tight chest, clenched jaw, tension, headaches. But emotions live in the body long before they reach our words or our behaviors. They start as small ripples. Your heart beats a little faster, your hands get restless, your shoulders stiffen. If you learn to pay attention to those early signs, you gain precious seconds. Seconds to breathe, to pause, to ask yourself, what's really going on before you let the emotion take over? Those few seconds are often all you need to change the outcome of a conversation or an entire day. But it's not just about physical signs, it's about mental habits too. Think back to the last time you overreacted. What thoughts ran through your mind right before it happened? This is so unfair. They never listen to me. I can't believe this is happening again. These are not just passing thoughts. They are red flags. They're the mental scripts we've rehearsed for years, often without realizing it. And they are usually tied to past wounds or unresolved beliefs. When you start to recognize those mental patterns in real time, you can stop them from snowballing into emotional explosions. This is why reflection matters so much. Looking back at moments where you lost control, not to shame yourself, but to learn, can reveal the roots of your emotional habits. Was it always the same person who triggered you? Was it always after a stressful day, or when you felt unappreciated, or when you were already tired? These patterns are not random, they are maps, and once you read the map, you can prepare for the terrain ahead. You can set boundaries, you can adjust your expectations, you can remind yourself, this is familiar, but I have a choice now. Self-awareness also means accepting uncomfortable truths. It means admitting that you're not always calm, that sometimes you're reactive, defensive, or overly sensitive. It means facing the parts of you that still carry pain from years ago. But here's the gift in that honesty. When you bring these patterns into the light, they lose their power to control you in the dark. You stop being driven by hidden fears or unspoken wounds. Instead, you become intentional. You become free. And over time, something beautiful happens. You begin to see yourself not just as someone who has emotions, but as someone who can hold those emotions with strength and clarity. You stop identifying with every fleeting feeling. You stop thinking, I am angry, and start thinking, I'm experiencing anger right now. That shift changes everything. It puts you back in the driver's seat. Once you've built this level of self-awareness, the next step is to expand your view beyond the moment. Most overreactions are fueled by short-term thinking. You feel disrespected, so you snap. You feel ignored, so you shut down. You feel hurt, so you lash out. And in the moment, it feels justified. But if you step back, if you ask, what will this reaction cost me tomorrow, next week, in a year? You give yourself a chance to act with wisdom instead of just emotion. Imagine two versions of yourself. One always speaks from impulse, always defends, always needs to be right. The other one pauses, thinks, and chooses their response with intention. Which one builds stronger relationships? Which one earns respect and trust? Which one do you want to become? Long-term thinking isn't just about what you avoid, regret, damage, tension. It's about what you build. Every time you choose not overreact, you're building trust with yourself. You're proving that you can be counted on, that you can be calm even when provoked, that you don't need to win every argument because you're already winning the deeper game, the game of self-mastery. And in relationships, this long-term view becomes priceless. You begin to ask yourself, is this comment, this text, this argument really worth disrupting the connection I value? You begin to choose connection over ego, peace over control, and understanding over being right. That doesn't mean you become a doormat or suppress your truth. It means you speak your truth with calm, with clarity, with compassion, and that's when people truly hear you. Over time, long-term thinking becomes your default. You no longer react just to relieve your own discomfort in the moment. You respond in a way that reflects your values, your integrity, your vision for who you want to be. And every time you do that, you feel stronger, you feel more grounded, you feel more like your best self. Because here's the truth, overreacting is a habit. It's something you learned, maybe from stress, maybe from childhood, maybe from never being taught a better way. But it's not who you are, and it's not who you have to remain. With patience, practice, and self-awareness, you can break that habit. You can build new ones, habits of calm, of perspective, of strength. You can learn to feel fully and still choose wisely. You can learn to honor your emotions without letting them take the wheel. And you can learn to respond to life not as a storm to survive, but as a journey to navigate with clarity and control. In the end, the journey to emotional control is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about learning how to recognize your emotional patterns, taking ownership of your reactions, and making space between what you feel and how you choose to respond. That space, though small in time, is enormous in impact. It's the difference between chaos and calm, between a relationship breaking and a relationship growing, between living in reactivity and living in alignment with your highest self. The truth is, every emotional reaction is an opportunity. It's an invitation to understand yourself more deeply, to revisit past wounds with compassion, and to make a choice that supports who you truly want to be. And you don't have to get it right every time. You won't. There will be moments where the emotion still takes over, where the old reaction slips through. But even then, you're learning. Even then, the fact that you notice it, that you reflect on it, that you want to do better, is proof that you're growing. The key is to stay committed to that growth, to stay curious, not critical, to ask, what was really going on inside me? Instead of, Why am I like this? One leads to wisdom, the other leads to shame. Choose wisdom, choose compassion. Because the more gently you meet yourself, the more powerfully you transform. Emotional control isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about knowing them, naming them, and making them work for you, not against you. When you feel anger, instead of exploding, you channel it into assertiveness and truth. When you feel hurt, instead of withdrawing, you communicate your needs. When you feel fear, instead of lashing out, you listen and reflect. This is mastery, not of emotions themselves, but of the response that follows them. And that is a mastery anyone can develop. One of the most beautiful things about this journey is that as you become more emotionally controlled, you also become more emotionally available. You're not afraid of feelings anymore, yours or others. You no longer view emotions as enemies, but as signals, as messages, as energy you can understand and direct. This openness creates deeper, more authentic relationships. People trust you more because they see that you won't explode, withdraw, or judge. They feel safe around you, and that safety becomes a foundation for real connection. Think of emotional control not as holding back, but as holding steady, like a strong tree in the wind. Yes, the storm may come, but you don't break. You bend, you breathe, you respond with rooted strength. That's the power you're building. And it doesn't just affect how you handle conflict. It affects your confidence, your decision-making, your peace of mind. You walk through life knowing that no matter what comes up, you have the tools to stay centered. You stop fearing your own reactions. You stop being afraid of what might trigger you. And that freedom? That's priceless. But remember, this kind of emotional stability is built slowly. It's not from one breakthrough or one perfect reaction. It's from hundreds of small moments. A breath here, a pause there, a journal entry, a question asked, a thought challenged. It's the accumulation of these mindful choices that reshapes your brain, your habits, your identity. And before long, people begin to notice. They say things like, "You're so calm under pressure. You handle things so well." And even if they don't say it out loud, they feel it. Your energy speaks for you. You become someone people want to be around because being around you feels steady, honest, peaceful. That's the result of choosing calm over chaos, reflection over reaction, wisdom over impulse. And every time you make that choice, you're not just avoiding a conflict or cooling a hot moment. You're sculpting your character. You're shaping a version of yourself that you'll be proud of 5 years from now. Someone who doesn't just survive emotional moments, but transforms through them. So the next time you feel that emotional wave rising, the quick anger, the sudden sadness, the sharp sting of offense, remember, this is your moment. This is your practice. This is where all your awareness, your tools, your growth comes into play. Breathe, pause, observe, ask, then choose. Not what's easiest, not what's loudest, but what's wisest. And know this, with every pause, every reflection, every mindful response, you are becoming emotionally free. Not because life is easier, but because you are stronger, more centered, more conscious. And in that freedom, you unlock your truest self. The calm within the storm, the wisdom behind the words, the strength beneath the surface. That's emotional control. And it's already within you, waiting to rise.